Shalom, Saints. This is Dion Tolly, and welcome again to another session of Deep Revelation series. And this particular series, we're going to deal with faith. And it's always puzzled me how we have a lot of our brethren who can pretty much recite scripture, in the scholarly fashion that they do, and proficiently recite scripture with accuracy for the most part. But on a carnal level, their, academia is up to par. But on a spiritual level, and actually believe in what they're reading, if they even understand what they're reading, then we fall far short. And in this post, we're going to examine that. And we're going to examine some of the applications of faith, particularly in this narrative of us leaving Babylon from this captivity that we've been in for 400 years. Now, I know a lot of people say all the time, and it irritates the heck out of me. Well, there's a lot of people say all the time that, slavery began way before America. It started in the 14th century, 15th century. And that's true. But according to the scriptures, we have to read the narrative. And the narrative begins in Babylon. Babylon separates this particular slavery, or captivity, I should say, from every other captivity around the world. Besides, there were different people and different nations involved in those captivities. The captivity of the South American, European captivities, particularly the ones that went to France per se, and before Christopher Columbus, that was completely different captivity when it relates to Babylon. First of all, the Portuguese were the traders and the merchants and the slavers of that period. The North American slave trade, as everybody knows historically, that was the Anglo-Saxons, the Germans or the Dutch, and the English. Okay? So that's completely different. That's a completely different narrative. They treated their slaves completely different, as most people know. America, this is unique because of the treatment. And the scriptures lay out the treatment of America. South America, they were marrying their slaves. And after a while, as we see in South America, Brazil and all that, different culture than we have now. And I'm not saying that they're freer or they have any more rights than others, but it's a different culture than we have here. We have a culture of oppression here, where there's at least a large degree of assimilation. And even though there's way more black Hebrews in Brazil than there are in America, but they have a different experience than we have here in Babylon. Babylon is exclusively about oppression. Now, people will say, why is that important? Well, it's important because Babylon is the head of an empire. The Most High, he views history in terms of empires. That's how he categorizes and classifies history, by empires. That's why Messiah came during the Roman Empire. And by empire, I mean ruling over, forgive me for skipping over my words, but ruling over every other nation on earth, being the sole power on the earth. So yours is a kingdom. Anyway, we're going to go to Isaiah real quick to prove that. Now we go to Strong's, and I use King James versions from the eSword. Those of you just joining us. And forgive me for skipping over my words primarily, because I'm a writer, not necessarily a speaker yet. I'll articulate, my studies and my scholarship a little bit better as time goes on. So don't worry about it. I just ask you guys to bear with me. Anyway, we're going to go visit Isaiah 14. All right? And sorry, I lost my place. And Isaiah 14 deals with, and as you can see by the Lords in there, that this is the King James Version. So as I read, you'll notice that I replace the words or the names that they given the Most High with the names that the Hebrews call them. And before we move on and read this, I just want to explain too that this is another reason before we get deeper into it that why Israel is so out of step when it comes to the spirit of the word and the manner in which we should believe it. Is because we haven't discerned yet between a religion and a bloodline. And I can't stress this enough. You've probably heard me say this over and over again in these sessions. It's because that's super important. We are a bloodline. That's what makes this so different from every other institution, religion, group, congregation, whatever it is you want to classify it. We are different because we are a bloodline. We are the Most High's people. So when people look at the prophecies concerning it, they take the Christian view. And Christian view is of a religion. So it's not really based in faith. In terms, and what I mean by that is that if you're dealing with family and you're dealing with the promises of a father, for example, you'll notice that a father makes a promise and a child won't rationalize it. He says he's going to take him to the park or take him to a game or take him somewhere. The child just believes it because there's a trust established because of the kinship. And that's the way the Most High deals with us. So this is why these promises can't be disputed, because there are promises made from a father to his children. And you got to understand that. Now anyway, America, making this a distinct nation in terms of the Most High targeting his judgment, but more importantly, targeting a nation where his people would have possession of, or his people would be in possession of, or they would be in possession of his people. Let me get that right. Well, anyway, it says, and it came to pass that in the day that I'm going to say Yahweh, or Yahuwah, you can say Yahweh or Yahuwah. This is just dialects. Most people argue things that are just really simple. And just like we call someone a certain slang in our native tongue and someone else may call it something different in theirs, you know, and the thing about it is that you can't translate a name. That's what's so deep about it, is that they translated a name, but these right here are titles. So we can translate them to the original titles that was given to the Hebrews to call our Most High. And anyway, it says, and it shall come to pass that in the day that Yahweh shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from thy hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. And that's this nation. And you'll see. And they say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city is seized. Yahweh hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. And we're going to stop here just to highlight the fact that America was slotted to be destroyed before it was even born, before it was even a nation. North America wasn't even a nation, wasn't even explored at that time. So this is what makes this so unique, because America wasn't even thought of, much less becoming and rising to the kingdom that it's become, to where it rules over every other nation on earth, economically, commercially, technologically, militarily, any way you want to call it. Excuse me. And it says, and he smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. So they're talking about America's turn to be persecuted. This is judgment. This is the context of this passage. And going on, he says, and the whole earth is at rest and is quiet, and they break forth into singing. That tells you just how bad America's been oppressing the earth. And he says, yeah, the fir trees rejoice in thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no feller has come up against us. And he says, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth, and it raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. Deep. This is where you get seeing all these sinkholes. If hell is from beneath, he's telling you he's moving it. This is why the earthquake and the surges. Most High is moving hell from where it was apparently in the Dudael from the book of Enoch. And it's moved under America. But that's another discussion. You can debate that with me later. Anyway, he says the pomp is brought down to the grave. I'm sorry, let me go back. He says, it stirred up the dead for me, even all of the chief ones of the earth. It raised up from their thrones all of the kings of the nations. And they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou become as weak as we? Art thou become like us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy vows. The worm is spread unto thee. The worms cover thee. This is what has always astonished me. Continuing in 12, he says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? So in the context of Most High laying out the judgment of Babylon, he's bringing up Lucifer. Why? Because all of the people know, particularly from religion, that Lucifer is said to be the king of the world, or the god of this world. And Babylon, in terms of geopolitics, is the ruler of the earth and the ruler of this world. So he's talking to the ruler spiritually as well as physically. Deep. Anyway, he said, thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of Yahweh, and I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And this is the reason why America and the Gentiles' kingdom primarily lays in the sides of the north, meaning North America and Europe, which is both to the north and uttermost parts of the hemisphere of both northern and the eastern and western hemisphere. Well, anyway, he says, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. He said, yet thou will be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit, and they that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, meaning that they can't even look them in the face, and consider thee, saying, is this the man? So everybody need to get that ghostly stuff out of there in terms of your perception of the devil. He's telling you here, this is the man. This is a man. He said, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms? And you know America, the way that they've been ramping and pretty much wrecking every government and destabilizing. And I'm not going to elaborate too deeper on that, but you know the deeds of America. And he says that made the world a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, and that opened not the house of his prisoners. Think about the approaching 3 million prisoners and incarcerated in Babylon. All the kings of the nations, even all of them, lie in glory, everyone in his own house. And thou hast cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain and thrust through with a sword. And thou shalt go down to the sides of the pit, as a carcass trodden underfoot. And they shall not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. He says, prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers. So he's letting you know that just because their fathers escaped, don't mean that be 3 or 4 generations removed with this slavery stuff and the oppression. So the Most High, he saved the judgment and his wrath and vengeance for the children, which is way worse. Everyone loves their children. Everyone builds up their wealth and all of their future for their children. Anyway, my phone is ringing. I'm sorry. Anyway, now he says, now we're going to go into it. He says, now they did not rise nor possess the land nor fill the face of the world with cities. He says, for I will rise up against them, saith Yahweh of hosts, and cut off Babylon, the name, meaning America, the remnant, and son, and nephew, saith Yahweh. So he's saying that he's going to make sure that they don't fill the cities anymore. That none of the remnant of their people will survive. He said he's going to cut off their name, anybody who survived, and the sons and the nephews. That means that there's just not going to be a trace of America. But moving on, just to make that point about, let's go to faith. I wanted to deal with faith. That was the purpose of this video. And I wanted us to see, particularly, where it begins, so we can understand that faith was an issue even in the days of our fathers. Now this is the period in which, after the 40 years that they were traveling around the wilderness, Moshe took them, and this was his synopsis at the end of the 40-year period. And this is where he laid out Deuteronomy 28, and this is where he's laying out the heart and mind of the Most High, or the Most High. I'm sorry. And anyway, he says, but Jeshurun, and I'm starting from 32:15. He says, but Jeshurun, where we get the word Yasharal from, where we get the word Yashar. This is, so understand that, and this is why I use this, because I can go to the Strongs and I could you can see the numbers represent the dictionary where it translates and transliterates it with the definition of every word that's written in the scriptures. This is why the King James Version, so it's Yasharun, right? Now we go to Yasharun, and sorry, I'm moving up a little too fast here, getting ahead of myself. Yashar, the book of Yashar, Moses, which I've always claimed and proven that it's been written by Moses. Well, anyway, this is what tell you that this is why we are called Yasharal. Anyway, moving on, let's go back to the regular text. He said, Yasharon waxed fat and kicked, thou art waxed fat, thou art grown thick, meaning that we were, after he delivered us from Egypt, our forefathers from Egypt, we were treated well. We grew fat and thick, we multiplied. He said, thou art covered with fatness. He said, then he forsook Yahweh, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods, and with abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to Yahweh, to gods who they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten Yahweh that formed thee. And when Yahweh saw it, he abhorred them, because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And this is important. And Yahweh said, I will hide my face from them, and I will see what their end shall be. For they are a froward generation, children in whom is no faith. And that's what this post is about. And I'm going to go to Hebrews the book of Hebrews, just to narrow it down. And I don't teach from New Testament other than the Gospels, Revelation, and Hebrews. Paul, which is a post coming up in the future, and a video coming up in the future. And we're going to deal with that, proving he is the Apollyon of Revelation. Christianity, outright, the doctrine of Christianity is based on the writings of Paul. And he wasn't even a disciple. Go figure. Said he was coming to Gentiles. He had nothing to do with the disciples. Said he went to Arabia. And I'll prove that to you. So if he was a Hebrew, why did he go to Arabia? Look at that. This is Paul. He said, neither I went to Jerusalem to them which are apostles before me, but I went to Arabia and returned again unto Damascus, which is Syria. So he's letting you know he's Esau. But that's another story. You know, my brethren don't have revelation, so they don't see these things. And it's a shame, actually. Well, anyway, go into the book of Hebrews.